If you have already watched this introductory information, you can skip ahead no more than 14 minutes. Hello, welcome. I am predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon & Garfunkel will die on August 8th, 2025. I'm also predicting that his funeral will be on August 12th, 2025. It is also possible that instead of him dying on August 8th, there will be a relevant, clear prophetic sign that will occur on August 8th that will reveal that Paul Simon will die on August 12th, and therefore August 12th will not be the date of his funeral. This time-stamped email proves that this prediction that Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025 has been known since November 9th. We can see here the timestamp November 9th, 2024. On November 8th, 2024, we received the relevant prophetic signs related to Paul Simon. And as I wrote right here, God was pointing to November 8th ahead of time because Simon's death will point to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. And this is the reason why Paul Simon will die on August 1st, 2025. In short, the date 8:1 and 11:8 hint at Revelation 8:1 in the Bible, which describes a period of silence that was observed in heaven. Paul Simon's first hit was Sound of Silence. As I wrote right here, it is exactly 38 weeks between November 8th and August 1st, 2025, and Paul Simon is predicted to die at the age of 83, for which 38 weeks hints at. All right, the analysis that God was pointing to August 1st was 100% correct. However, Paul Simon did not die on August 1st. Instead, God provided clear and relevant signs related to Paul Simon, which revealed adding 7 more days to reach August 8th. The sign we received was the news report, the breaking of the news of the sale of the storied mansion in Los Angeles that was built for the most prolific TV producer in history, and God uses extremes and records for his signs. Aaron Spelling, who produced the longest-running drama series in history, Seventh Heaven. That's how we get the addition of 7 days to reach August 8th. And Simon is associated with mansions, or I should say in God's signs, mansion theme and symbolism is related to Paul Simon because his biggest solo album was the Graceland album, and the song Graceland is about Elvis Presley's mansion. There's lots to that for why God is using this theme. But this is immediately recognized. I've been following Paul Simon's signs for years now, and I've known about this theme of mansion symbolism for over 3 years. And so that's why it was immediately recognized that this sign involving the sale of this mansion, and one of the big signs is the sale of Paul Simon's mansion. It's not only a mansion sign on August 1st that we received, but the story was the sale of the mansion. And that's again because one of the signs is the sale of Paul Simon's mansion back on July 1st, 2022. And that the details of that prophetic sign are explained elsewhere. Now, another thing about the 7 days connection is Paul Simon at this time on August 1st he still is, but he won't be by the date of August 8th, touring for his new album, 7 Psalms. The cover art for the album is from Thomas Moran's Two Owls, and it depicts owls. And on this same August 1st date, another prophetic sign was a mass shooting in the 41st state. Paul Simon was born in Paul Simon was born in 41, and the reason for that, the significance of that, is that the word he is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And it is a key that opens the bottomless pit in one of the 7 trumpet judgments in the book of Revelation that follows the period of silence that was observed as in the sound of silence in the beginning of Revelation chapter 8, Revelation 8:1. And Paul Simon is known for being a music composer, and music compositions use music keys. And also, so that's why the key, the 41st state, clearly hints at Paul Simon. In general, God uses the mass shootings for symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which is also mentioned in that same trumpet judgment, is alluded to anyway, in that same trumpet judgment in which the key opens the door to the bottomless pit to the demons that will cross over into the earthly realm and demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing that comes out, which is symbolized by the things that come out of guns and go into people. That's why mass shootings are prophetic signs. So we have a mass shooting in the 41st state, and it was in the bar named the Owl Bar. The name of the bar in which the 4 deaths occurred, and God is associated the number 4 with Paul Simon and his signs in general, and that's explained elsewhere. But it was 4 deaths, and that's because the door that opens to the bottomless pit is symbolized by the number 4, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door, and it's the key that opens the door to the bottomless pit. And so that's why the number 4. And so it was 4 deaths in the Owl Bar in the 41st state. Paul Simon's born in 41, and hints at key. And he was born on the 13th day of the month, and the 41 is the 13th prime number. And so that's why we also have the number 4 there. And when we add 7 plus 4 days, we get a total of 11 days. And we add that 7 plus 4 days to August 1st, gets us to August 12th. And also August 12th is 11 days after August 1st. And on August 1st, the story was the sale of the mansion, which sold for $110 million, which hints at 11. In other words, what I am saying is that God is also pointing to August 12th. And I believe at this time that it is the date for the funeral. But if this isn't correct, it is because Paul Simon will die on August 12th. And instead, on August 8th, we will receive more clear, relevant prophetic signs that will probably involve the number 4 and indicate adding 4 more days to reach the date on which it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on August 12th. But as of right now, anyway, I believe that Paul Simon will die on August 8th. 7 days after the 7th heaven sign the sale of the mansion of the producer of 7th Heaven. And also, by the way, Paul Simon's Graceland album released the song The Boy in the Bubble, and that song was inspired by one of Aaron Spelling's TV movies, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. Another connection between Aaron Spelling, the mansion sale, and Paul Simon. And also, The Boy in the Bubble song is from the Graceland Mansion album, and that album is Paul Simon's best-selling album, solo album, and it is the 7th album of Paul Simon. Now, the reason for going into this right here at the beginning of this little introduction, the main point here, is that I predicted Paul Simon's death on August 8th, back in November of 2024. For those that are reasonable, for those with eyes to see, this will be clearly recognized. Again, I predicted back on November 9th, 2024, that Paul Simon would die on August 1st. Then we received the clear and relevant signs that indicated adding 7 days to reach August 8th. And so when Paul Simon dies on August 8th, as is predicted, it will therefore mean that I predicted his death on August 8th, if you will, back in November of 2024. The reasonable person will recognize that this is true. A dirty bomb is a conventional explosive that uses radioactive material. I am predicting that 3 dirty bombs will explode in New York City, in Times Square, Penn Station, and Grand Central Station. There will then be a massive evacuation from Manhattan Island. I am predicting that these 3 dirty bombs will explode on either August 30th or September 4th. I am also predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in the port of Los Angeles on September 4th. I am predicting that Tehran, Iran, will be nuked by the US or possibly Israel on September 7th, 2025. This will obviously be in response to the dirty bombs that are predicted to explode in New York City. I am predicting that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom will die in a plane crash in St. Louis as they are traveling from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles in Busch Stadium in St. Louis on August 2nd, 2028. This will be during the predicted presidential campaign of Gavin Newsom. As a result of Gavin Newsom's death, Michelle Obama will become the Democrat Party's presidential nomination. Michelle Obama will, quote unquote, win the election over J.D. Vance on November 7th, 2028, and will become the president on January 20th, 2029. Donald Trump is predicted to run as J.D. Vance's vice president. This scheme to overcome the 22nd Amendment will backfire and inspire Michelle Obama and Barack Obama to run on the ticket with Barack Obama as Michelle Obama's vice president. She will then step down and Barack Obama will become the president again. It is predicted that there will be a massive Mary apparition on the beach in Rio, Brazil on April 24th, 2029. It is now recognized that there will be 2 massive Mary apparitions on the beach in Rio. The first of the 2 is predicted to be on March 22nd, 2029. These predicted Mary apparitions will not be secretive. They will be mainstream, worldwide news. Like all Mary apparitions in history, including at Lourdes, Guadalupe, and Fatima, this Mary apparition will be a demon pretending to be Mary. It is predicted that on April 26th, 2029, the key will open the bottomless pit and fallen angels will cross over into the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the 5th trumpet judgment that is described in Revelation chapter 9, when the demonic realm collides with the earthly realm. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to demons pretending to be aliens. The demons pretending to be aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. It is predicted that Pope Francis will be resurrected from the grave on April 26th, 2029, and it is possible that on this day, Pope Francis will announce that aliens have arrived and have made him the ambassador for the world. This will immediately give Pope Francis, the Antichrist, supreme power over governments of the world. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to a zombie pandemic and the masses becoming demonically possessed that will be facilitated through the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist and 5G frequencies. April 26th, 2029 will be a symbolic beginning to the coming genocide politicide in America. The resurrection rapture event will occur on Pentecost on May 27th, 2029. On September 11th, 2029, there will be a catastrophic asteroid hit of Earth in the Indian Ocean. The greatest seismic effect of this will be felt on the other side of the globe, which is North America, and this will trigger an eruption of Yellowstone volcano and will cause the volcano in the Canary Islands to collapse into the Atlantic Ocean and send a mega tsunami towards the East Coast. It will also trigger the collapse of the Hoover Dam, which will cause a water panic in California, and many other devastating earthquakes. The day of the Lord, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, Judgment Day, will be at the end of 2031. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will die on August 8th, 2025, tomorrow. The date the video is posted on your social media platform confirms that this is being made, this video, the day before it's predicted he will die. That said, it has been known through God's big picture of prophetic signs that Paul Simon is very important and that his death will be a massive prophetic sign and a warning to America of judgment and destruction. But we can see also here, and there have been videos that have been posted prior to today, and it has been known since November of 2024 that Paul Simon would die in August of 2025, as I've explained, probably at the beginning of this video. Okay, so I won't explain it again. But anyway, here in this email, you can see this particular prophetic sign occurred on August 6th. That's why the late hour for this video is because this video, or rather the information in this video, the prophetic signs occurred on August 6th, just 2 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die on August 8th. And I will explain how these prophetic signs on August 6th confirm that Paul Simon is predicted to die on August 8th. It's truly profound. So in other words, God has done these prophetic signs at the last minute here, if you will, just a couple of days before Simon's death. All right, so let's get into it. Speaking of the number 2, as in 2 days before Paul Simon's death. On August 6th, RFK Jr., head of the HHS department, announced that contracts for the M, middle letter is R, last 2 letters are NA, thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing research, are being canceled. 22 contracts worth $500 million have been canceled. That's a typo. I forgot to put the million in there. All right. And so G500 in the Strong's Greek Concordance is the word for Antichrist. The number 22 in God's big picture of signs is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist that is described in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter out of 22 letters, is the last and 22nd letter of the alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes. And chromosomes come in pairs, and each of the 2 chromosomes in the pair have 2 arms each. So 2 and 2, which hints at 22. Because again, the chromosomes are altered. That's what makes a person marked when they have taken the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing. And the thing, begins with an MR, ends with an NA thing. That thing is the mark of the Antichrist. It is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or false form of religious worship. For those who are wise, it did come with a false form of religious worship, leftist politics. And also, it does not need a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the main reasons why the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is that it is judgment for this particular doctrine, which is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And he says that he hates this doctrine, the Nicolaitan doctrine, in the book of Revelation regarding the end times. And that doctrine is what gives us dispensationalism. the dispensationalism is the package in which free grace or cheap grace comes in, with its close cousin sovereign grace, which comes in the package of Calvinism. This is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, and when the prediction comes to pass, it'll prove this. And it'll also prove that the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. And that is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. Make no mistake. I know far better than you the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God, and it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. These controversial things that are overwhelmingly demonstrated to be true through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, which will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. And that's why God will make this prediction come to pass, to prove this channel and the controversial things that I am saying that are demonstrated through his big picture of science. And so, the commonly held objections that people have based on their understanding of Bible prophecy regarding how the begins with an MR, ends with an NA thing isn't the mark of the Antichrist are not true when the prediction comes to pass. And so, the debate will be over. There will be no more discussion when the prediction comes to pass, and that's the purpose of the prediction, to end the controversy. Okay, and I'm not saying that there isn't going to be a new form of this thing in the future, and I'm not saying also that one cannot repent after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. There's nowhere in Bible prophecy that says that. Okay? And the commonly held objections that people have, such as the forehead and the hand and all of that, those objections are answered in the must-watch snake bite video on this channel. But again, make no mistake, the prediction will prove that these commonly held objections are not correct. That's the purpose of the prediction. Okay, so let's continue, but that's good to get that out of the way here, because that's the subject of this video, the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, which is what God is using RFK Jr. for. Because RFK Jr. is one of the two witnesses described in Bible prophecy who speak truth for God. That's another controversial thing that will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. It was never meant to be that all quote-unquote Christians would clearly know who the two antichrists are, etc. It's just like how Jesus said, for those who can see it, John the Baptist was Elijah. The point is that not everyone will see that. That's the point. God intended it to be that way. It's the same as people saying that, well, the reason why the mark of the Antichrist couldn't possibly be the mark of the Antichrist is because my priest or my pastor would have told me. Well, that's not how it works. Furthermore, Jesus forbid priests and pastors. He said there was only one teacher. And anyway, I've spoken about that enough in other videos. And of course it was meant to be that not everyone would recognize that it is the mark of the Antichrist. And even possibly the majority of quote-unquote Christians not recognize that it is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, and there's good reason for that. Very good reason for like I just alluded to. And it's related to the Nicolaitan doctrine, which actually talks about once saved, always saved. And it is this doctrine, the root of the bad tree that's producing the bad fruit. And the reason why the Antichrist is coming now is because God is very, very displeased with the American evangelical church. But he reproves whom he loves. All right. Okay, so the second of the two witnesses announced or trumpeted that the MR ends with the letters NA, things are not safe, and that 22 contracts are canceled 2 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon will die at the age of 83. 83 is the 23rd prime number, and begins with an MR and ends with an NA. thing alters a person's 23 pairs of chromosomes. The death of Paul Simon will point to the sound of silence in heaven in Revelation chapter 8. Paul Simon also points to the bridge that demons will cross when they emerge from the bottomless pit, as described in the fifth trumpet of judgment that follows the sound of silence in heaven. Simon and Garfunkel's fifth album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. Okay, so Paul Simon, this is just scratching the surface of why or how God is using Paul Simon. His big first hit was Sound of Silence, which is described in the beginning of chapter 8, which is why he's predicted to die on the date 8/8. And also following that period of silence in heaven that's described, there is the trumpets of judgment, and one of them is the fifth trumpet, which involves a bridge the demons will cross over, and Simon and Garfunkel's fifth album was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And Paul Simon's name equals 500, and his only solo number one hit was 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, and on, with the number 5 in Paul Simon. Mass shootings symbolize the begins with an MR and ends also with an NA, thing, consumption. Okay, so mass shootings symbolize the thing consumption by the masses. And 5 days before RFK Jr.'s announcement regarding the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA things was the day of the prophetic mass shooting at the Owl Bar in the 41st state. Simon was born in 41. The word key that opens the door through which the demons will cross and then go over the bridge is equal to 41 in simple English gematria, and music composition, which Paul Simon does, involves keys. Anyway, Simon was born in 41, hence the mass shooting at the Owl Bar in the 41st state. 41 is also the 13th prime number, and in the Bible, the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. And again, we are talking about the mark of the Antichrist here. Simon's last tour date in promotion of his new album that depicts owls on its cover art. Okay, so the new album has owls on the cover art, and that's why the mass shooting was in the Owl Bar in the 41st state. Okay, and so the last tour date in promotion of this new album that depicts owls on the cover art was the same day that RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the begins with an R and then also ends with an NA thing. Simon's last concert on August 6th was in Seattle, which God is using in general for the Space Needle that is in Seattle. The Space Needle is symbolic of transhumanism thing technology, right? Because it's the Space Needle, and space is a hint at transhumanism technology, space age, space technology, etc. I mean, that's why it was, I'm sure, called the Space Needle, because it was built in the 60s, and that would have been the type of vocabulary that they would have used to describe futuristic technology, because it was the World's Fair. So the Space Needle. Okay, and that's amazing because transhumanism thing technology begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing. But there's more to this Seattle connection here. But Paul Simon's last tour date was the same day that RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the thing. And Seattle is known for things, the Space Needle. Now, Elvis Presley famously promoted the polio thing by taking one of them prior to a concert. It can't be understated how important Elvis Presley taking the polio thing was. I think back in 56 or 58 or something. It was extremely important in the history of things. It popularized and made it acceptable, popular, etc., for the baby boomer generation. In other words, had Elvis Presley not taken the thing that day, history would have been entirely different regarding the thing. And so that's why God is using this, the king of rock and roll. Now, the king of rock and roll with his mansion in Graceland in Memphis is symbolic of a king's palace in Memphis, Egypt. And the king of Egypt in the Bible is symbolic of the type or symbolic of the Antichrist. He persecuted the Israelites. The Antichrist will persecute Christians. Okay, and so true Christians, that is, because there'll be quote unquote Christians on the side of the Antichrist, as there already was during the years of the CVD disease. Okay. So we're painting the picture here. We're connecting Paul Simon to the Space Needle and Elvis Presley here now, because his last concert was at the Space Needle, or near it anyway. And Elvis Presley was at the Space Needle, or rather near it, when he was at the World's Fair to film a movie. And that was after he took the Thing. Now, and he's responsible largely for the Thing industry. Now, Simon's best-selling solo album was Graceland. The song Graceland is about Elvis's mansion. Elvis covered Simon's song Bridge Over Troubled Water. Simon's Bridge Over Troubled Water single sold 1.6 million copies. 1.6 hints at 16 and 4 times 4. The Graceland mansion is in the 4 times 4th state. The number 4 in God's signs is symbolic of the door, because the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the symbol for a door. And the door symbolism in God's signs is the same symbolism as a bridge. And Simon's big hit was Bridge Over Troubled Water. And the door in the book of Revelation is opened with a key. And Simon composes music, which uses music keys. And again, Simon was born in 41, and key is equal to 41 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. It is a key that opens the door to the bottomless pit to the demons in the 5th trumpet judgment, like I was mentioning, the 5th trumpet judgment earlier. These demons will demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And actually, it says that this will be the case in that prophecy, the 5th trumpet, that the demonic possession of people will be for 5 months. Again, 5th trumpet, and also Paul Simon's association with the number 5, as I mentioned. And also Bridge Over Troubled Water was the 5th and last album of Simon and Garfunkel. And so, the opening line of the song Graceland is, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The demonic possession will be facilitated by 5G frequencies. Again, it is described in the 5th trumpet judgment. And the demonic possession will last for 5 months, but it'll be a result of 5G frequencies, and music is frequencies. And that's why Paul Simon also. And these 5G frequencies will trigger in the brain of people delta brain waves, which will engender demonic possession. Delta is the 4th letter of the Greek alphabet, and we get the word delta from dalat, the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is a symbol for a door, which is what will be opened to the bottomless pit for the demons to come through and then demonically possess people who have taken the mark of the Antichrist through delta brainwaves. Demonic possession equals shining. Okay, so the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. The movie The Shining starred Shelley Duvall, and Paul Simon famously dated Shelley Duvall and famously or infamously broke up with her at the airport, as in portal, as in door to the demonic realm, before she flew to the UK to film The Shining. The movie The Shining is about demonic possession and also demonic possession of a massive hotel, which is mansion symbolism, which also ties back to Paul Simon and Elvis Presley with the Graceland Mansion. And that's why, because the song Graceland is about the Graceland Mansion, and the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. Incidentally, the word Mississippi is unique in that there are 2 letters that are repeated 4 times. That gives us 4 and 4. The Antichrist is the 44th president. Who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which will engender the shining or the demonic possession of people? The king of rock and roll's mansion in Memphis, in Little Egypt, is symbolic of the king's palace in Egypt. And again, Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. The Israelites escaped the king of Egypt in the Bible after 400 years of affliction. RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA things 400 days, which is hinted at with the 400 years in the Bible. And this is connection to Little Egypt, like I'm saying, because of Graceland and all that in Little Egypt, America. 400 days after the U.S. government. Okay, so RFK Jr. made his announcement regarding the things, the mark of the Antichrist, 400, and again, the king of Egypt persecuted, and the mark of the Antichrist is for the purpose of persecution. 400 days after the U.S. government, as in RFK Jr. announcing for the U.S. government regarding the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA things. Okay, 400 days, he made that announcement 400 days after the U.S. government awarded Moderna, which is the pioneer of the begins with an MR and also then ends with an NA. This company was awarded 4 times $44 million for begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing research on July 2nd, 2024. It's an exact 400 days. And the grant was for 4 times $44 million. That's an astounding thing because, again, this confirms that the thing, the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA, is the mark of the Antichrist that will trigger demonic possession of the demons that have crossed from the demonic realm through the door. And the number 4 is equal to door in God's signs. In God's signs, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. Elvis's hit song Little Egypt was on his 9th soundtrack album. RFK Jr., the head of HHS, made his announcement regarding the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA things exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 weeks after he first testified in Congress for his position as head of HHS. And again, he's one of the 2 witnesses, and that's why his testimony, as in the testimony of the 2 witnesses in Bible prophecy. So this was the first day that he testified, which is a very big prophetic sign. Obviously, he's one of the 2 witnesses, and he's testifying. What is he testifying about? The thing that God is using him for. RFK Jr. is God's voice regarding the truth, regarding the thing. That's, by the way, why RFK Jr. has an issue with his voice. It's symbolic of how he is God's voice. Speaking truth. And the haters of truth and the lovers of lies are against RFK Jr. for that reason, because they're aligned with Satan and they don't know it. Now, but the connection here with Elvis and the number 9, because it symbolizes God's judgment, is that the announcement here, because of Elvis's 9th soundtrack album, on which is the song Little Egypt, RFK Jr., and his announcement was exactly 9 plus 9 plus 9 weeks, and God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning, after he first testified in Congress, okay? As he was being considered for the position of the head of HHS. Now, the first day of testimony of RFK Jr.'s was on the date January 29th, the date 129. Okay, in 2025. G129 in the Greek concordance is the word meaning blood. So that's why RFK Jr. testified on this date that hints at blood. Because the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing is put into people's blood, and it poisons their blood. It's all about the blood, and that's how the mark marks people, through the blood. January 29th was also the day that a passenger plane collided with a Black Hawk helicopter in Washington, D.C., which was a prophetic sign that pointed to the doping scandals in the figure skating world, which itself hints at begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA scandal. It is the biggest scandal in all of history. But okay, so let's just go back here. The plane collided with, first of all, it's in the air. Like I was saying, it's 5G frequencies that will demonically possess people. And Satan in the Bible is called the prince of the power of the air. That's why the air will be used to demonically possess people and trigger the delta brainwaves. And also music is frequencies and in the air. But these planes collided in the air. So another more symbolism for the prince of the power of the air. But God has been in general using helicopters in his science to symbolize a few things, well, a couple of things. They symbolize the dragon with the tails of the helicopters. That's a long story, and I don't just draw that from nothing, right? I have more than 7 years of full-time watching God's signs to know these things. And so that's one thing that helicopters in general symbolize. But also the rotor blades typically are 4 blades, and that hints at an X, which God is using to symbolize the mark of the Antichrist. Because, for example, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist that I mentioned earlier in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, which was an X. So the X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. By the way, that's why the 2 eclipses that passed over each other and right over Little Egypt, over America, hint at the mark of the Antichrist. And Little Egypt because the king of Egypt persecuted the Israelites. And he's symbolic of the Antichrist, who will persecute Christians through the mark of the Antichrist. So that's another reason for the helicopter, okay? Now, the thing, though, about that story, if you recall, the plane was carrying, most of the passengers on the plane were from the U.S. Olympic figure skating team. Okay, and there's lots of amazing things to this story, and I can't just make the video. I've already made the video. There's no point in talking about an hour about it because that's what it would take. But it pointed to the figure skating community in general. I mean, the part of the story too was how Nancy Kerrigan was in tears on the day of the accident or the day after because some of the members were from her club in Boston. And on and on. So, I mean, it was all, and she is also symbolic of scandal and figure skating because of her and the other girl that were rivals years ago, if you recall. And I think that's her name, Nancy Kerrigan. I forget the other girl's name, but that was all a big scandal too. So it's all about scandal in the figure skating community, which is about, and that's because it's and there's proof of this, but just like I said, I don't remember the details, and it's in the other video. But there's details that confirm all of this. But the figure skating community is symbolic of these things, the doping scandals, and doping. What do they use to do the doping? They use these things. Like in Seattle, there's a space needle, right? They use those things. That's why the symbolism. That's why the figure skating team was on this plane on the day that RFK Jr. was testifying about the space needles. You see what I'm saying? All right, so Paul Simon equals bridge, which is the same symbolism as door, which is the same symbolism as a gate. 2 days before Simon's predicted death, Lionsgate, what do you call it, a film production, or rather a film distributor, announced that Mel Gibson's Resurrection movie will be released in 2 parts in 2 years, which hints at 22, the mark of the Antichrist. The resurrection and rapture will take place as an escape of God's faithful from the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by the number 22, I should say. So this is another sign that occurred on August 6th. Besides the announcement of 22 contracts, we had the announcement of the Resurrection movie being in 2 parts and being released in 2 years. And that was literally part of the story. It'll be released in 2 parts, but it won't be for a couple of years, 2027. 2 years. That's amazing, because it's the same day as the 22 contracts sign. Okay? And it's Lion's Gate. The lion in the Bible prophecy is symbolic of Christ. So he'll be opening the gate, if you will, for the resurrection rapture. Okay? All right. As I mentioned, just continuation, which hints at 22. The 2 parts of the movie in 2 years. This was the same day as the cancellation of the 22 begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing contracts. The rapture will be a resurrection and escape of God's faithful from the begins with an MR and then also ends with an NA thing that is the mark of the Antichrist. And that wraps it up for this video. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or 2 that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.